The contents of this podcast are for informational purposes only and should not be interpreted as endorsement of any product, services, or enterprise.
An engineering professor, an art professor, a nonprofit, and state and federal agents walk up to a creek. It sounds like the setup to a bad joke, but this unusual combination of partners has been the key to a unique project that has garnered lots of attention in the past few years. Welcome to Reclaim, Restore, and More, a podcast dedicated to digging deeper into the Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation, and Enforcement. I'm Emily Isaac with OSMRE's Office of Communications. The following interviews were originally recorded in February of 2024. You may know Ohio for its Buckeyes and Cincinnati chili, but it is also known for its production of coal. More than 3.7 billion tons of coal have been mined over the past 2 centuries in Ohio. That's enough to cover the entire city of Cincinnati with a pile of coal more than 20 feet high. Before federal regulations on coal mining were established in 1977 with the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, or SMCRA, many mines were left abandoned or not properly reclaimed. This can cause a whole host of environmental and human health issues. One of these lingering effects is an opening, known as the Truetown discharge, that pours polluted water into the Sunday Creek watershed. The Truetown discharge is located in Athens County, Ohio, in the bituminous coal region. The source is an abandoned underground mine known as AS-193. Cabe Shaw, an abandoned mineland project manager with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, provides context about what exactly happened there.
It was abandoned in 1963, and all was well with the world. But in 1983, a pump hole that they used to use as a pump hole, but they sealed it in 1963. It ruptured, and it came out in the back of these people's yard, and it was directly tied to a historic abandoned mine land. So we were able to address it because it was a water impact from a historic mine, even though it popped out after SMCRA. So we, at the time, OSM and us did a project and just channelized the discharge to the creek, and it sat. And here we are, 40 years later, with the knowledge and the funding to be able to address it. So acid mine drainage in some instances is a long game.
Truetown is the single largest discharge in the state of Ohio, with a flow rate of about 1,000 gallons per minute. That's approximately 20 bathtubs worth. Each year, it dumps more than 2 million pounds of iron oxide into Sunday Creek, which then flows into the Hocking River. To put that in perspective, a male African elephant can get up to 14 or 15,000 pounds. That means about 1 elephant's worth of pollution is produced every 2 days, or 180 elephants every year since the 1970s. John Sabraw, an art professor from Ohio University, tells of his experience seeing the Truetown pollution for the first time.
You can't believe it. You come around, you can smell it first. A lot of times, I'd say about half the time, depending on the size of the seep, you don't even see it and you can smell it. You can smell that sulfur, right? And then when you come up on it, and it is this really bright orange and sometimes a little bit deeper red with, if there's aluminum other things, you got these like white edges. It's really, really surprising. Yeah.
This type of water pollution, known as acid mine drainage, or AMD, lowers the pH of the stream to a level that native wildlife cannot thrive in. More importantly, iron oxide coats the bottom of the creek bed so that bugs have nowhere to live and fish cannot lay their eggs. In 1997, an Ohio EPA report found that 13 miles of Sunday Creek were essentially dead. Sabraw saw the iron sludge and was immediately intrigued by the idea of turning it into paint. At the same time, Guy Riefler, a civil engineering professor from Ohio University, looked at the Truetown discharge and noticed that the water was trying to clean itself as it emerges to the surface, and that process was being carried out by biological organisms. These organisms live in extreme conditions where other forms of life cannot survive. He thought, if we could just harness the power of these organisms, it could be used to treat acid mine drainage naturally and quickly. Serendipitously, Dr. Riefler and Professor Sabraw came together and started to make something amazing. Turning pollution into pigment wasn't unheard of. Dr. Riefler explains how the inspiration came about.
I was at a conference, and a researcher from Pennsylvania, Bob Hedden, gave a presentation where he was collecting acid mine drainage pollution and making paint out of it. And coincidentally to that conference that I was at, shortly before then, I was also at an advisory committee meeting for Sunday Creek, and they were looking for a solution to their problem. And we couldn't come up with anything because it was so big and there was so much iron and there was so much acid and the site was so small. And there were all these problems with current technologies. And I saw those two things and I put them together and I was like, oh my God, this is my project. Like, this is what I've been waiting for. Early on when I was working with John, we were looking at different ways of drying the pigment. And what we'd found is I was trying to make goethite, which is a yellow, a specific mineral that's yellow in color, and it's got a strong market value. So I was always targeting goethite as our product. And to do that, we found that you needed to dry it at room temperature, because when you heated it up, the color changed. And John was over in my lab and he said, well, how high have you tried? And I was like, well, I haven't, because it gets browner as you get hotter. And he's like, well, let's try hotter. And I said, why? He says, well, let's just try it. And so I processed some of the pigment and it in an oven that I have, and it turns out when you heat it up to 500 degrees Celsius, it turns this brilliant red color. It is an abrupt change in quality, and it's a gorgeous color. And it's actually it turns out it's a different mineral. And so we got those results, and it was amazing, and it makes a great pigment. And John came back and he said, so how high does that oven go? I was like, well, it goes all the way up to 2000, but we don't want to do that. And he says, let's do it. So we processed it at 2000 and it turned into this amazing purple, which apparently in the art world is very unusual to have an iron-based purple pigment. It's hard to get a good color purple. There's different natural sources from it, but there aren't really many iron-based ones. And we still haven't figured out exactly why it's purple. That's something that I'm still scratching my head about. So just a good example of how having a creative, fearless person around can drive the research.
Sabra and Rievler connected with a local nonprofit called Rural Action and started a small-scale effort to gather iron sludge coming out of the Truetown discharge and turn it into pigments. They started a partnership with the paint company Gamblin, which now sells 3 colors of oil paints made with Truetown pigments. There's a large market for iron oxides in the US, yet almost 90% of what we use is imported. This means that there's an opportunity to meet that demand with a sustainable, domestically sourced product. Brent Means, a hydrologist with the Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation, and Enforcement, explains how we can start looking at pollution as an asset.
One viewpoint is that it's all this pollution that's coming to pollute the environment, which that's true. But the other truth is also, humans' mind created this void, which allowed pyrite to oxidize, produce iron. And now Mother Earth, through precipitation events and flooding the mine and then it discharging, is somewhat mining the earth for iron. So you can also look at this as, instead of basically ripping up, like they do for iron up in the northern Michigan, where the iron belt is, to mine iron ore, we're letting Mother Earth, we'll say right now, dissolve the iron minerals into the mine drainage. And then you can look at that as a feedstock to recover the mine drainage or recover the iron that could be used in a commodity. So the other way of looking at this is not just that it's pollution, but it's a potential resource.
This is where things started to ramp up, and the team realized they needed to think bigger if they wanted to start a commercially viable operation while treating the pollution at the same time. They received a $1 million Abandoned Mine Land Economic Revitalization Grant, or AMLR, an OSMRE program that supports local investment opportunities that provide for sustainable, long-term rehabilitation of coalfield economies. Cabe Shaw explains how ODNR and OSMRE helped to develop a pilot plant to test their methods.
We started out with kind of an idea from Dr. Riefler, the engineering professor, and OSM brought a team down. We set up a pilot plant with kind of on site right next to the steep, and OSM came in and did a 2 or 3 day tests out there at the pilot plant, and we kind of had to reorganize and change our treatment strategy. So they've been pivotal in actually nailing down the appropriate treatment strategy for the water chemistry and flow that's coming out, and then getting it to this point where we found the consultant. And now when the consultant submits design flows, plans, a lot of that, since Rich and Brent have the experience, we're leaning heavily on their technical expertise. It's beyond what the other members have their expertise as well, but quality control and quality assurance, and even the consultant was impressed with our level of review, because they said a lot of times they'll submit documents and nobody reviews it. And they were really happy to have all the feedback that our team provides, and led by Brent and Rich. They're just, and they're easy to work with. Really, really, if they weren't involved, we would not be where we are right now. And I tell them this all the time, but it's the truth.
Brent Means and Richard Beam from OSMRE's Pittsburgh field office are providing technical support and expertise on designing a large-scale treatment system and assisted with water quality testing at the site, while ODNR directly oversees the design and construction process. Through pilot testing, the team realized they needed to adjust their initial idea, as it is tricky to treat such a massive amount of water while also harvesting the iron oxides in a way that is suitable for high-quality pigment. They developed an innovative method using a chemical oxidant to target the iron and force it to precipitate quickly. However, there will be a section of the treatment plant where Dr. Riefler and his students can continue their research on his biological treatment method.
I've had probably 10 to 15 graduate students work on this project, probably the same number of undergraduate researchers, and then several classes we've used it as a class project. So, a lot of my students are interested in cleaning up pollution, and same thing I'm interested in making the world a better place. And we talk about these methods in class, but it's not until you really get out and get your sneakers all orange that you realize that you make the connection between the classwork and your own community, because these sites are pretty common out here in Southeast Ohio, and every community has got its own set of problems. This is the one that we have, and it's easy for the students to see the importance of what they're learning and see the impact that they can have. And they find it really inspiring. And I've seen the difference. I've seen their attention to classwork change once they've been out and working on something like this. So yeah, it's been a great experience for me as an educator.
Rural Action has also been granted $3.5 million from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act to build a 39-acre treatment facility, which will treat approximately 1.4 million gallons of water per day. In addition to the treatment plant, there will be a wetland on site to filter out any remaining metals. Normally, since treatment systems are not very visually appealing, efforts are made to obscure them from view. This time, however, the team started thinking about the possibility of highlighting the treatment process rather than hiding it.
And the art professor's like, well, if we have a wetland, I mean, of course, I'm just thinking a square rectangular wetlands like all the ones I've worked on in the past. And he's like, well, why can't we make it like a leaf shape and, have different colors here and there. And then we can have a community path and, an interpretive trail. And so, yeah, I mean, I'll just say that, working with people with different interests, I mean, literally there's an energy there that makes for a way better project, because yes, you can shape the wetland in any way, and why have a rectangle? And if you can have something more visually appealing that would maybe attract the community over to say what's going on here, and in the meantime they learn something about the environment, and support future cleanup efforts as well.
During their collaboration, John Sabra gained insight into the benefits of bringing art and science together.
I mean, I enjoy my role as, I don't know, as a fool to the king or joker to the king or whatever. It's my job to come in, and when the engineers are talking one way, it's my job to go like, well, yeah, but what if everything was a banana? Or when we're designing, we had to figure out the wetland, and I was like, well, what if it's a community wetland, and what if it's actually a sculpture park, and they flood with the seasons and everything, and everybody gets really, really quiet in the room, and I know I've overstepped, normalcy, but then there's such cool people that after that quiet, they're like, oh, I don't know, maybe. And then I keep working on it. I'm like, what about, is it gonna look like this? And it could look like this, and we could do this. And then eventually we're now literally designing this wetland as a sculpture park. And it's that's my job, and I'm okay with it. Art and science share two things: curiosity and failure. Scientists are an absolutely curious bunch, which is why it's really, really fun to hang out with them, They're maybe the profession that's most closely related to artists in terms of the fact that they just don't stop wondering about things and asking questions about things. And that's all we're doing as artists. That's all we're doing. We're like, what if this was this? And what if I could make a thing that looked like this? And what if people could come and see that and have a conversation I want, right? And so that's amazing. But the other thing is that, and this is something I learned working with my colleagues, is that boy, there's a lot of failure in science. There's just a lot of failure. You're like, yeah, oh, dang, no. And in art, it's the same thing. You're like, this is going to be the most amazing. Oh, maybe it's going in the dumpster. And there's this sense of failure. But together, I think it's just it's a part of our psyche that it doesn't stop us. It rarely even slows us down. We're like, okay, what's next? What's next? And I think that's something that artists and scientists share for sure.
The treatment project will not only benefit the environment, but the surrounding communities as well. Low-income communities are disproportionately affected by polluting industries and are not often prioritized when it comes to development. The hope is to invest in these areas that have historically been left behind.
Communities for like 100 years have just known nothing but red water and dead streams. And overnight, they're like confounded by, what the heck happened last night? The stream's clear. They may have had no idea 5 miles up the stream, an AML program is developing this mine drainage treatment plant that literally will change the stream overnight, at least visually. Biologically, it may take months or years, but visually, it's an overnight. And that is a crazy magic trick that is going to be experienced at Truetown, and it's pretty exciting. So the socioeconomic effect, you don't need data to prove it. You just need eyes to look out there and say, do you want to live next to this? Of course not.
The truth is, if you meet people one-on-one, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, people are just people. And their political views are different, etc. But on the ground, you meet people, you want to get something done, you explain what it is, 95% of the time, they're like, let's do it. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, they don't care, right? But once you describe what you're doing, gosh, you just kind of almost instantly made a lifelong friend. I'm not going to speak to I think how they view acid mine drainage in general, but people I've spoke to know that they remember catching fish out of the stream. They remember playing in the stream and without getting all their clothes orange and things. So for them, I think in terms of their own psychogeography, what I've heard is that they understand what this means and they're really on board with it. And I'd like to deliver for them,
Michelle Shively McIver, Rural Action and True Pigment LLC's Director of Project Management, has played a pivotal role in fostering community relations and making sure their voices are heard.
I remember really early on seeing a landowner out at a festival in Shawnee, and she came straight from my table. I had a big, pictures and a big tabling set up, and she came up and she said, "What did you guys do?" And I thought, oh my gosh, what did we do? I don't know. And she said, no, there are fish in the West Branch, there's fish by my house. Like, what did you do? And it was right after we had installed the doser upstream, and she was seeing the impacts of that. And her family had lived there for generations, and in her lifetime, she'd never seen fish in that stretch of the creek. So those kinds of stories are the most rewarding, and I think really at the heart of why we're all doing this kind of work. And we have this one site in particular, this downstream of one of our lime dosers, in a small tributary called Pine Run. And we had actually stopped doing fish and bug monitoring downstream of that. We have a site near the high school in Perry County, Southern Perry. And we just stopped monitoring there because it had been years and we literally had not caught any fish. That was essentially dead. And just a couple years after we installed the doser, we were able to find 17 species of native fish at that same site. So going from 0 fish to 17 different species was pretty incredible. And now I'd have to look, but I think we're up to like 21 or 22 species at that site, and have kind of marked some other metrics of the quantity of fish that we find, and just seeing really incredible recovery in that stretch of stream. So we know what's possible in Sunday Creek, and we also know that there's a lot of recovery potential following this True Pigments project at Truetown, because we have this great water quality that's further upstream in the watershed, and also the Truetown discharge impacts the bottom 7 miles of Sunday Creek. So then when you've got the confluence with the Hocking River, which is also a higher quality river. So, we're kind of like bookended by good fish populations. So once we fix that water quality in between, I really feel like we're going to see that recovery happen pretty quickly.
A groundbreaking ceremony was held in June of 2023, and the Truetown project is currently in the design phase, which will take a year or so to finish. After that, construction will take another 2 years. The plant is projected to open sometime around 2027. This project has started a lot of conversations about other beneficial uses for pollutants like iron oxide, and how lessons learned from this process could be replicated and applied to other efforts in the future. Dr. Riefler explains how even small treatment projects could benefit.
At other sites where the iron concentrations are lower, it would be hard to make it profitable to do the same thing. You still have a lot of water to treat, but you're producing less pigment to sell. So there's a limitation there. But one way we've envisioned this is that, once the Truetown plant is up and running, we could truck sludge from other plants to the Truetown plant. So the Truetown plant could be sort of like a hub for pigment production, while we can use the same technology at other sites to clean up the water without having to build multiple pigment operations. So that's one model which we're considering.
Rich Beam, an abandoned mine land and regulatory program specialist with OSMRE, expands on other beneficial ways mine wastewater can be used going forward.
For a number of years in Pennsylvania, the gas industry has been opting to use treated mine water for hydraulic fracturing of gas wells in the shale gas wells in the Marcellus and Utica formation. And it's a pretty impressive impact, because instead of using clean water sources like stream water or municipal water in some cases, being able to use treated mine water for that purpose really is a multi-fold benefit. Also, back in the early 2000s, in 2002, Pennsylvania DEP partnered with a watershed group in northwestern Pennsylvania called the Toby Creek Watershed Association. An active mine drainage treatment plant was built on Toby Creek on a discharge of about a 500 gallon a minute abandoned underground mine discharge. Water's treated, it improves Toby Creek, but the other really cool thing about it is Toby Creek Watershed Association uses that treated water to raise fingerling trout. And every year they have trout that they stock in all over Western PA, and that income from the trout hatchery portion of the treatment facility does offset some of the costs of operating the facility. More recently, there's been a lot of interest, especially in the state of West Virginia, for looking at and actually more than just looking at, there are pilot projects, and I think they're well on their way to developing full-scale projects, looking at extracting rare earth elements from mine drainage or from the treated mine drainage sludges.
All in all, the Truetown project is the result of the symbiosis between different entities coming together to revitalize coal communities and the environment. ODNR works tirelessly to reclaim abandoned mine lands across the state with federal funding from OSMRE. In 2022, ODNR estimated that the exposure to dangerous AML-related issues was reduced for 23,888 people due to their reclamation efforts. However, the fight is far from over. More than 67,000 acres affected by abandoned mine lands in Ohio remain in need of cleanup. Luckily, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act has boosted support for Ohio AML work to the tune of $46 million annually. Federal resources, state agency efforts, and on-the-ground work from Rural Action, plus a little creativity and ingenuity from two unlikely partners from Ohio University, has turned out to be a recipe for success.
The solutions to climate justice, the solutions to all these things that we're dealing with, whether it's the energy infrastructure, whatever you want to name it, we can solve it right now. Not because there's a miracle vending machine, but because of exactly what our project does. Bring creatives, communities, and scientists together with government support. You can get it done.
You can keep up with Rural Action's efforts to produce pigments at www.truepigments.com. You can also follow the project's progress at www.odnr.gov under their Mining, Reclamation, and Restoration page. For more information about OSMRE's efforts to restore and revitalize former coal mine lands and communities, visit www.osmre.gov. Thank you for joining us on Reclaim, Restore, and More. Stay tuned for what we dig up next time. From OSMRE, I'm Emily Isaac.